mention that I'm a sucker for an aesthetically pleasing book cover? Because I am a sucker for an aesthetically pleasing book cover. Although the summary for The Poet Empress definitely hooked me too, I am additionally quite a sucker for any book, historical or fantasy, that has some court or royal intrigue in it. And as The Poet Empress promised this, I decided to give it a read. 16-year-old Wei Yin is a poor rice farmer's daughter living in the fictional country of Tensha, which is loosely based on Chinese culture and history, and is, as the book begins, burying her newborn sister Larkspur with her mother. Their region, like much of Tensha, is suffering from a terrible famine that's just taking people out left and right, and the latest victim, unfortunately, is Larkspur, who only lived 3 days. Wei, her parents, and her darling 7-year-old brother Bao are constantly hungry and impoverished, as is most of their community. When she goes to the city, her mother tells her to walk like a city girl in the hopes that a city boy, who is ostensibly better off, will notice her and want to marry her, resulting in stability for her family. The ruling family of Tensha, the Azalea House, are the keepers of the most powerful magic in the land. The men of the family have sigils on their faces, bestowing unique powers onto them. The dying emperor has 5 sons. There's Maro, the oldest, whose sigil allows him to create roads and pathways and signifies travel and commerce. Terran, who can create swords and represents military power. Isan, who can create fruit trees that signifies food and nature. Kiran, who can create wind. And baby Ruyi, who doesn't have a clear-cut power yet. Another important part of this world is the literamancer. Literancers are always men because girls are legally forbidden from learning how to read. But through cultivating the magical art of poetry, they can write out blessings that cause things to happen. Making trees blossom, for example. Blessings are handed out sparingly as they can only be created by literancers, and they have to write actual lines of poetry to do it. After Isan comes to town and announces that his brother, Crown Prince Terran, is looking for concubines as part of his ascension to the throne, Wei throws herself in the lineup, hoping she might be able to secure some support for her village. Being the only country girl in the lineup, Wei is bullied by the other girls and looked down upon by damn near everyone she encounters. This continues even after, during the concubine selection, Terran randomly selects her to be his empress in waiting. As in, his future wife. So Wei's got this, right? Things are looking up? Not really. Unfortunately, as it turns out, Terran is a complete fucking psychopath, who proceeds to start torturing her when she comes to him at night. So Wei finds herself engaged to a monster in unfamiliar surroundings, full of both run-of-the-mill bullies and political rivals that want her dead. And then, upon getting a eunuch to teach her how to read, Wei finds that she might be able to use literamancy to save herself and Tensha from the complete monster that Terran is shaping up to be. And that's all I'm going to say for the recap, because as you'll soon see, I absolutely adored this book and genuinely believe that its ridiculously high Goodreads rating is 100% deserved. Go read it. Okay, so, why do I like this book so much? Not long ago, I reviewed a book, Iron Widow, by Ciaran J. Zhao. It shares some commonalities with The Poet Empress, in that they're both set up with a backdrop of Chinese history, fantasy, and culture. They also both discuss themes of discrimination, abuse of power, and the oppression of women. Throughout this review, you're going to hear me make several references to Iron Widow, because I believe that a lot of the things that irritated me about that novel are things that The Poet Empress did very, very, very right. So first, the setting and lore. Do I have a super fine grasp of the entire land of Tensha and its history? No, but I don't need one. I need the parts that are relevant to Wei and her story, and I'd argue that the author did a great job shading in this fictional country with relevant details that actually mattered to my understanding of the plot and my enjoyment of the book. I actually didn't realize just how, little major detail was gone into the whole country of Tensha, because she did such a good job of filling stuff in on a smaller level. I know the role that magic plays in society. I have a basic grasp of both the larger geopolitical rivalries. The looming war with another country is brought up constantly throughout the book and is a factor in a lot of choices the characters make, and the internal political situation in Tensha, especially among the clans, whose family members populate the royal family's court. This isn't a book where you're going to need a breakdown of all the different clans at the head of the book. Pay attention and you'll be able to keep up to speed with everything that's being thrown at you. You only need to know so much to understand what's happening. The history of the Emperor, his father, and the fallout that eventually pushed his sons apart felt very natural. And as Wei gathers information, she realizes that she's being given conflicting information from different parties. One person says this happened, and she figures out that it's kind of true, but not the whole story. She has to piece things together to figure out what's true and what isn't. And there's several points at which Wei kind of, is very interesting. She kind of chastises herself and says, "Oh, you were so foolish and so arrogant to think that you had the full story after asking just one person." And I thought that that was very interesting because it really, I think in a subtle way, shows that Wei is that she has the ability to be smart enough to understand that she doesn't know everything. I like that in a character. And I may as well just move on to Wei right now and her characterization. She was wonderful. Her character development was exquisite. She goes from a slightly naive country girl determined to do right by her family and community, and then gets more than she bargained for when she becomes Terran's fiancé. Wei says towards the beginning of the book that she finds it difficult to view the royal family as people, and throughout the book she struggles between her intense desire to survive, to kill Terran, but also to not lose herself to anger and rage, especially since she doesn't see the royal family as human, and she could theoretically justify doing bad things to them if she wanted to. But she learns and grows and makes mistakes that have meaningful consequences, and she is so goddamn clever in a very realistic way. It doesn't come across like the author is conniving. Like, there are some books where the author puts their character in a situation where the character manages to work their way out of it, but not because they're clever, but because you can tell that the author had to kind of like connive a way for the character to get out of it. You know, it doesn't come across like the character is intelligent. It comes across like the author had to rig things in their favor. Wei is intelligent. She is very smart, and she is convincingly smart. And she also becomes just very good at playing all the political games that she has to play to stay alive. She's such a good and clever character. One of the things that kind of bothered me in Iron Widow, with Zetian's character, is that she constantly sounded like a modern-day feminist dropped into medieval China, constantly raging about how unfair and arbitrary everything was, and somehow magically knowing that, like, maidenhood tests, that being tests that are supposed to confirm whether or not you're a virgin, and the village elders saying that girls couldn't touch tablets because they would contaminate them with their female wickedness. She just somehow magically knows that these are complete bullshit, despite being raised in a country village with minimal exposure to anyone who could have planted that idea in her head. Her attitude was, anyone who doesn't respect me doesn't get respect in return, despite being raised in a culture that expects the exact opposite. She was being blackmailed to take nude photos of herself, and after initially being quite upset and demanding to know why the blackmailer hates women, suddenly experiences a heel-face turn and says, "Lol, it's my body. I came into the world naked. This is no big deal at all. Shame is a choice, and I choose not to feel it." My point is that Zetian stuck out as a sore thumb, in my opinion, because it's like she didn't even understand the logic behind the very culture she was born and raised in. If I'm being completely blunt, it read like the author had very specific views that they wanted to impart to the audience, and was more concerned about getting those views across than they were creating a character that felt like an organic part of her world, warts and all. Like, go off if that's what you want to do, but I'm ultimately not going to have a very positive view of the character or the story you've created, because instead of trying to make them fit into the world that they were born and raised in and were socialized in, you're creating a character that's going to play well to a modern audience. Wei was just, God, the exact opposite. Yes, there are comments here and there about the oppression of women regarding the selling of girls into brothels and the laws that bar women from becoming literate, which nearly gets her killed a few times. But the discussion doesn't whack you over the head. We're not getting a sermon about female oppression. The themes are worked organically into the plot of the story, and the Wei challenges gender inequality in the story, she does so in a way that makes sense, not just for her as a person, but for her as a citizen born and raised in this fantasy world. She was a character before she was a mouthpiece, and at the risk of sounding harsh again, I feel like that's basically what Zetian in Iron Widow was. She had little to no personality beyond strong woman with progressive feminist thoughts that's going to get applause from modern feminist readers. She had little to no personality beyond strong woman with progressive feminist thoughts who is designed to appeal to modern feminists who are more concerned about the message coming out of a story than they are whether or not the story is well constructed. Another similarity between Wei and Zetian is that both struggle with desires for violence and revenge against those who have hurt them. And again, I argue that Poet Empress handled this character arc a lot better than Iron Widow. Zetian was always angry and sassy and ready to kill. There really isn't that deep of a character arc for her beyond the fact that she just gets more violent and angry, and that anger is directed at damn near everyone in front of her. With context, Iron Widow is a female rage story, so that does make some sense, but I still would argue that it's not explored in a particularly deep way. Wei, on the other hand, starts off as a peasant girl who knows a little about what goes on beyond her village, and then progressively goes savvier and sharper as she's forced to survive in terrible conditions at the palace. I am not going to give away the details of Wei's character development regarding whether or not she stays true to her desire to be good or becomes seduced by evil. I'm simply going to say that by the end of the book, I was extremely satisfied with her internal journey and the author's depiction of her character and the choices she's willing to make and not make to stay alive. Her final form made sense within the context of everything that's happened to her over the course of the story, and I feel that the way the book ended was a very right ending for her. Long story short, in terms of storytelling and character development, I feel that while The Poet Empress and Iron Widow share a lot of features, The Poet Empress is, to me, the superior story in all respects. It was smart, it was suspenseful, and Wei was an absolutely fascinating and well-layered character whose inner world and logic and cleverness I can believe. She came across like a real person and not, a mouthpiece for the author. On the other hand, her betrothed, Taryn, was a psychopath. Freak-ass murder machine. I want to say first that this is not what you would call a romantasy. This isn't Wei getting to the palace and finding a safe, edgy bad boy with a heart of gold. This is her hearing bad things about him, briefly wondering if they might be exaggerating once she gets her first look at him, and then finding out that, nope, actually he is a massive asshole who kills anything that annoys him, be that thing an animal or a human being, but never someone important, which tells you he can resist the impulse. His character development was very interesting as a result, particularly since we're only getting snippets of people's past recollections and experiences with him, and what Wei herself observes. And this all matters a lot because in order to write the heart-spirit poem that might be able to kill him, Wei has to fall in love with him first. So she's actively forcing herself to learn more and more about Taryn for the sake of learning to love him, just so she can possibly kill him. Taryn's final form in this book was pretty wild, actually, but like with Wei's ultimate fate and characterization by the end of the book, I'm not going to say just how things shake out for Taryn. I'm only going to say that I thought it was a good and solid bit of storytelling from the author, and I actually didn't see it coming. The remaining characters in the novel were solid. I actually really liked at the beginning of the book. There's this bit the night before the concubine selection where Wei's mom gets into bed with her and tells her that she doesn't have to go, she can change her mind. And Wei is really blown away by it because she thought her mom loved her in the way a lot of mothers in the village love their daughters. Like, sure, I love you now, but once you're married and you're kind of not my problem anymore, I'm just going to love you a little less. Even though her mom didn't play much of a role in the story beyond this, I thought that was really nice characterization that further emphasizes why Wei wants to save her family. And also, again, contributes to that understanding of the culture that Wei is coming from. What kind of environment has shaped her way of thinking when it comes to her approach to the world and the things that happen in the story. In general, something I really enjoyed about this novel is that Wei loves her family and her village and so many people within her country and culture, while still recognizing the flaws within it. She recognizes that her brother is more valued than her in some ways because he's a boy, but he's a loving child, and so she adores him even though he is unfairly favored over her. And even though her father stands, quote, stone silent when her mom and brother are crying after she's selected, she recognizes that this is his way of saying that he'll miss her. Furthermore, when she's getting ready to participate in the concubine selection, her entire village kind of bands together to help her out and give her as much, stuff that she'll need to offer tribute to the palace, even though her village is highly impoverished and most families are living on the edge of starvation. They're still trying to help her out, and Wei openly acknowledges that this is done with the understanding that by helping her now, if she achieves something, she'll be coming back and bringing, favors to them. Ultimately, by helping one person, they're helping their entire community. And I thought that, again, it's just a really good way of highlighting the kind of culture she was raised in and how it shaped her character. And additionally, I know this isn't a romantasy, but I've read a lot of it for this channel, and there's just so much, rejection of home and family and culture in the genre. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The concept can definitely work with a solid writer. I'm just saying that it's a very popular trope within romantasy that the main female character realizes that her family and people are the real bad guys, and sexy, hunky bad guy and his people are actually the good guys. And I think it's just refreshing after all that to see a fantasy novel where, yes, the heroine's culture and family and country are flawed, but she still loves and respects parts of them in spite of those flaws, whilst also seeking to improve things as best she can. I think it's just refreshing overall to read a good fantasy novel. Well-developed characters, meaningful conflict and relationships, not overly reliant on tropes, and in general is just an incredibly well-crafted story. I definitely recommend The Poet Empress. Excellent, excellent book. If you are a fan of the Apothecary Diaries, the manga series, or the, I think they do light novels too, and I think there's an anime for it. But if you're into the Apothecary Diaries, you might like this book. It's got very similar vibes. I think the Apothecary Diaries generally runs maybe like, the tone is lighter, but a lot of that court intrigue and stuff that goes on there, it's similar enough in concept that you may enjoy both. Well, that'll be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and have a good night.